The crystal vase shattered against the marble floor, inches from where the elderly woman cowered. "You pathetic old witch!" Priscilla's voice dripped with venom as her manicured hand rose again. But before the next blow could land, Nina stepped between them, her dark eyes blazing with a courage that would cost her everything. What happened next would expose a web of lies so twisted it would bring a billionaire empire to its knees and force one man to choose between the woman he thought he loved and the truth that could destroy them all. The October sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hartwell mansion, casting long shadows across the imported Italian tile. Nina Jackson moved quietly through the grand hallway, her worn sneakers silent against the polished floor. At 31, she had learned to make herself invisible in spaces where people like her were meant to be seen but never heard. "Mrs. Eleanor needs her medication in 10 minutes, she whispered to herself, checking the small notebook she kept in her uniform pocket. The 76-year-old matriarch of the Hartwell family had become more than just an employer to Nina over the past 8 months. She had become the grandmother Nina lost to cancer 3 years ago. Eleanor Hartwell sat in her sunroom, wrapped in a cashmere shawl despite the warmth. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and her pale blue eyes sparkled with the kind of wisdom that comes from surviving both triumph and tragedy. "There's my angel," Eleanor said softly as Nina entered with the medication tray. "Mrs. Eleanor, you'll make me blush," Nina replied, smiling as she set down the tray and poured water from the crystal pitcher. "I mean it, dear. You have a light about you. It's rare in this house, especially lately." Nina understood. She'd seen the change, too. Ever since Justin Hartwell, Eleanor's only son, had brought Priscilla Monroe into their lives 6 months ago, the warmth had begun to drain from the mansion like water from a cracked vessel. Priscilla was beautiful in the way that magazine covers are beautiful. Flawless, cold, untouchable. Her blonde hair always fell in perfect waves. Her designer dresses never wrinkled. Her smile could light up a room or cut through it like a blade, depending on who was watching. The sound of heels clicking against marble announced her arrival before she appeared. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Priscilla said, her voice honeyed but her eyes sharp as she entered the sunroom. "The help and the invalid, having your little tea party." Nina's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "I was just giving Mrs. Hartwell her afternoon medication." "How noble," Priscilla said, examining her nails. "Tell me, Nina, do you always hover like this? Eleanor's a grown woman. She doesn't need a babysitter." Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she reached for Nina's arm. "Nina is a godsend, Priscilla. She's staff," Priscilla interrupted, her smile never wavering. "Let's not pretend she's family." The words hung in the air like poison. Nina felt the familiar sting of dismissal, the kind that reminded her of every job she'd worked where her humanity was optional. "I'll leave you two to visit," Nina said quietly, gathering the tray. "Actually," Priscilla's voice stopped her at the door. "Justin and I are having dinner with some investors tonight. Eleanor, you'll join us. And Nina? Make sure Eleanor looks presentable. We can't have her looking like she just rolled out of a nursing home." When Priscilla left, Eleanor's composure crumbled. Tears streaked down her weathered cheeks. "Don't let her see you cry," Nina said gently, kneeling beside the older woman's chair. "People like her feed on tears." "My son doesn't see it," Eleanor whispered. "He looks at her and sees beauty. But I see what's underneath. I see the cruelty." That evening, as Nina helped Eleanor dress for dinner, the older woman gripped her hand tightly. "Promise me something," Eleanor said, her voice urgent. "If something happens to me, if I can't speak for myself, promise you'll tell Justin the truth." "Mrs. Eleanor, nothing's going to happen." "Promise me." Nina squeezed her hand. "I promise." The dinner was held in the mansion's formal dining room. Nina served the first course, moving efficiently between the kitchen and dining room. Justin Hartwell was a man who commanded attention without demanding it. At 38, he'd built his father's modest tech company into a billion-dollar empire. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, his suits custom-tailored, but his gray eyes held a kindness that seemed at odds with his wealth. "Mother looks beautiful tonight," Justin said, smiling at Eleanor. Priscilla's hand found his under the table. "Doesn't she?" I made sure Nina took extra care with her appearance. As the evening wore on, Eleanor grew tired. Her head began to droop, and her responses became slower. "I think I need to retire," Eleanor said softly. "Already?" Priscilla's voice carried just enough disappointment to sound concerned. "Justin, your mother's leaving us. Let me help you, Mom." Justin began to rise. No, Priscilla interjected smoothly. "You stay with Mr. Davidson. Nina can handle it. That's what we pay her for, after all." Nina helped Eleanor to her feet, supporting her weight as they moved slowly toward the hallway. They were halfway up the grand staircase when Eleanor stumbled. Her medication made her dizzy sometimes, and the stairs were steep. "I've got you," Nina said, tightening her grip. "Just one step at a time." They reached the top of the stairs and turned toward Eleanor's suite. But Priscilla was already there, standing in the dim hallway like a ghost. "She's taking forever," Priscilla said coldly. "At this rate, Justin will think something's wrong." "Mrs. Hartwell just needs rest," Nina replied evenly. "Mrs. Hartwell needs to stop being such a burden," Priscilla snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. "She's pathetic, clinging to relevance in a house that's moved on without her." "That's enough," Nina said, her voice low but firm. Priscilla's eyes flashed with rage. "Don't you dare tell me what's enough. You're nothing, a nobody who cleans up after people who actually matter." Eleanor's legs buckled, whether from exhaustion or the emotional assault. Nina couldn't tell. She caught the older woman, lowering her gently to the floor. "Stay with me, Mrs. Eleanor," Nina whispered. Priscilla's heel connected with Eleanor's shoulder in a vicious kick. "Get up, you manipulative old woman. Stop pretending to be weak just to get attention." "Stop!" Nina threw herself over Eleanor, shielding her with her own body. "She needs help. She's not well." "She's fine," Priscilla hissed. "She's always fine when Justin's around. It's just another performance." The next kick caught Nina in the ribs. Pain exploded through her side, but she didn't move. She kept her body between Priscilla and Eleanor, her arms wrapped protectively around the trembling woman. "You think you're a hero?" Priscilla grabbed Nina's hair, yanking her head back. "You think anyone will believe you over me?" "I don't care what they believe," Nina gasped. "I won't let you hurt her." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them all freeze. Justin appeared, his expression shifting from concern to confusion as he took in the scene. His mother on the floor, Nina crouched over her, Priscilla standing above them both. "What the hell is going on?" His voice was controlled but edged with steel. Priscilla's transformation was instantaneous. Her face crumpled, tears springing to her eyes. "Thank God you're here." "I tried to help, but Nina," she just snapped. "She pushed your mother down. I couldn't stop her." Nina's blood ran cold. "That's not true." "Look at her," Priscilla cried, pointing at Eleanor. "Look what she did." Justin's eyes moved from his crying fiancée to his mother, who lay silent and pale in Nina's arms, to Nina herself, whose uniform was disheveled and whose dark eyes blazed with desperation. "Mr. Hartwell, please listen," Nina began. "Get away from my mother." His voice was quiet, deadly. "Sir, I was protecting her. Priscilla was. I said get away from her." Nina's heart shattered, but she gently released Eleanor, her hands trembling as she backed away. Justin knelt beside his mother, his face pale with worry. "Mom, can you hear me?" Eleanor's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes found Nina's, full of anguish and apology. Priscilla hovered behind Justin, her hand on his shoulder, her tears perfectly timed. "I'm so sorry, darling. I should have been more careful. I should have seen the signs that she was unstable." Justin's voice was cold, final. "You're fired. Pack your things and leave. Now." The words landed like blows. Nina opened her mouth to protest, to explain, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He had already decided. "Please," she whispered, "check on her. Don't leave her alone with—" "Get out!" Priscilla hissed, dropping the facade for just a moment. "Before I call the police and have you arrested for assault." Nina looked at Eleanor one more time. The older woman's eyes were closed now, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Then Nina turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. She gathered her few belongings from the staff quarters, changed out of her uniform, and left through the service entrance. Outside, the October night was cold. She sat in her old Honda Civic for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, before finally turning the key. As she drove away from the mansion, past the iron gates and manicured lawns, she whispered to the empty car, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Eleanor. I'm so sorry." The cheap motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Nina sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at her reflection in the spotted mirror. The bruise on her ribs throbbed with each breath. Her phone buzzed. Another bill collector. She silenced it and pulled out the worn photograph she kept in her wallet. Her mother, smiling in her own nurse's uniform, taken the year before cancer stole her away. "What would you do, Mama?" Nina whispered to the image. The answer came in memory, her mother's voice, steady and sure. "When you see wrong being done, baby girl, you speak up, even if your voice shakes, especially then." 3 days passed. 3 days of unanswered calls to Eleanor's private number. 3 days of checking news sites for any mention of the Hartwell family. On the 4th morning, her phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Miss Jackson?" The voice was unfamiliar, older, careful. "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm the head housekeeper at the Hartwell estate. We need to talk." Nina's heart raced. "Is Mrs. Hartwell okay?" A long pause. "That's what I need to discuss with you. But not over the phone. Can you meet me at Riverside Park, the north entrance, in 1 hour?" The park was nearly empty when Nina arrived. Margaret Chen was easy to spot. A small, dignified woman in her 60s, sitting on a bench near the water. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said as Nina approached. "I wasn't sure you would." "Is Eleanor all right?" Nina asked immediately. Margaret's expression darkened. "She's declining. The doctor says it's stress and anxiety, but I know better. Miss Priscilla has been different since you left. Bolder, crueler." Nina's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "The first night after you were dismissed, I heard shouting from Mrs. Hartwell's room. When I went to check, Miss Priscilla was there, standing over her. Mrs. Hartwell was crying, begging her to leave, but Miss Priscilla just laughed." "And Justin?" "Mr. Hartwell works 18-hour days. When he's home, Miss Priscilla is all sweetness and light." Margaret pulled an envelope from her purse. "But I saw something. The security system, the cameras are still recording." Nina's breath caught. "You have footage. Not me. But I know where it's stored. The problem is, if I'm caught accessing it, I'll lose everything. But if someone else were to obtain it, someone who's already been terminated..." Understanding dawned. "You want me to get the footage?" "Mrs. Hartwell trusted you. And right now, she needs someone who isn't afraid to fight for her." Margaret's eyes were pleading. "I can get you into the house when everyone's gone. Next Tuesday, Mr. Hartwell has that conference in Atlanta. Miss Priscilla will be at her spa day." Nina should have said no, should have walked away and protected herself. But Eleanor's face haunted her dreams. "What time?" Nina asked. The mansion looked different in the gray Tuesday morning light. Nina's hands shook as she entered the security code Margaret had given her. The panel beeped, and the lock clicked open. "I'm here, Mrs. Eleanor," she whispered to the silent house. "I'm keeping my promise." The security office was in the basement. Hours passed as she navigated through folders and files, searching for the footage from that terrible night. Finally, she found it. The hallway camera. She held her breath and pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. She watched herself helping Eleanor up the stairs, watched Priscilla appear, her face twisted with contempt. The audio was muffled but audible. She's pathetic, clinging to relevance in a house that's moved on without her. Then Eleanor, collapsing. Nina catching her, lowering her gently. And Priscilla's kick, brutal, deliberate, unmistakable. Nina's vision blurred with tears as she watched herself shield Eleanor, watched Priscilla yank her hair, watched the violence she'd endured. She copied the file to a flash drive with trembling hands. As she did, she noticed other folders, other dates. Curious, she opened one from 2 weeks earlier. The footage showed Priscilla alone with Eleanor in the sunroom. Eleanor was asleep in her chair. Priscilla stood over her, then picked up Eleanor's water glass and, with deliberate care, emptied a small bottle into it. Nina's blood ran cold. This wasn't just abuse, it was systematic. She copied that file too, and 2 others that showed similar incidents. She was so focused on the screen that she didn't hear the footsteps on the basement stairs. Well, well. What do we have here? Nina spun around. Priscilla stood in the doorway, her perfect hair pulled back, her beautiful face ugly with rage. You're supposed to be gone, Nina breathed. Canceled my appointment. Had a feeling something was off. Priscilla's eyes moved to the monitor. You stupid, stupid girl. Nina grabbed the flash drive and stood. I'm leaving. With my property? I don't think so. It's not your property. It's the truth. Truth? Priscilla laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. Truth is whatever the person with power says it is. Who do you think Justin will believe? His beautiful fiancée or the disgraced maid? Nina's mind raced. You're poisoning her. Slowly, deliberately. I saw the footage. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Priscilla's face. You're insane. Am I? Or are you afraid that a talk screen might prove otherwise? The sound of a car in the driveway broke the standoff. Priscilla's eyes widened. Justin wasn't supposed to be back until tonight, Nina said. Perfect timing, Priscilla recovered quickly. He'll catch you red-handed, breaking into private property, stealing confidential files. But Nina was already moving. She pushed past Priscilla and ran up the basement stairs, the flash drive clutched in her fist. Behind her, Priscilla's shout echoed. Justin! She's here! She broke in! Nina burst into the main hallway just as Justin entered through the front door. Their eyes met. What are you doing here? His voice was hard, suspicious. Ask her, Nina said, breathing hard. Ask her what she's been doing to your mother. Priscilla appeared, tears already streaming. She broke in, Justin. I caught her in the security office, stealing footage. She's probably been planning this revenge. Show him, Nina interrupted, holding up the flash drive. Show him what I stole. Justin's expression was unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, security office. Now, both of you. They descended in tense silence. In the small room, Justin inserted the flash drive. Nina stood behind him, heart pounding. Priscilla remained in the doorway, her mask beginning to crack. The first video played. The hallway, the stairs, Eleanor collapsing, Nina catching her, and then Priscilla's kick, clear and unmistakable. Justin's body went rigid. Wait, Priscilla began. Don't. His voice was barely above a whisper. Don't say a word. He played the next video. Priscilla poisoning Eleanor's water, then another, and another. When the final video ended, Justin sat motionless, staring at the blank screen. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. How long? Since I moved in, Priscilla said, and for the first time her voice held no pretense. She was in my way. Always watching, always judging. I just wanted her gone. Justin stood slowly. When he turned to face Priscilla, his expression was cold, empty rage. Get out! Justin, please. I'm calling the police. You have 30 seconds to leave before I have you arrested for assault and attempted murder." She fled. The silence that followed was deafening. Justin moved like a man in a nightmare, climbing the stairs to Eleanor's suite. Nina followed at a distance. Eleanor was in her bed, pale and frail, her breathing shallow, but when she saw Justin's face, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, taking her hand. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I should have believed." His voice broke. Eleanor's gaze moved past him to Nina, standing in the doorway. She smiled weakly and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Eleanor Hartwell lay in the bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped rhythmically. Nina sat in the corner chair, having refused to leave. "You should rest," Justin said. "So should you," Nina replied, noting the dark circles under his eyes. 3 days had passed since Priscilla's departure. The toxicology report confirmed what Nina's instincts had known. Eleanor had been systematically poisoned with small doses of prescription sedatives. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to weaken her, confuse her, make her seem older and more fragile than she was. "Attempted murder," the detective had said. "We've issued a warrant." But Priscilla had vanished. Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Nina?" "I'm here, Mrs. Eleanor." Nina moved to the bedside. "Tell her," Eleanor whispered. "Tell her I knew." Nina frowned. "Knew what?" "About her. About the real Priscilla Monroe." Eleanor's eyes moved to Justin. "In my nightstand at home. Bottom drawer, there's a folder." Justin left immediately. He returned an hour later, his face ashen, carrying a manila folder stuffed with papers. Without a word, he handed it to Nina. Inside was a private investigator's report, dated 8 months earlier, right when Priscilla had entered their lives. Nina read, in stunned silence. Subject: Priscilla Monroe. Birth name: Patricia Moore. Background: criminal record sealed as juvenile. 3 prior relationships with wealthy men, all ending in restraining orders. Pattern of manipulation, financial abuse, and violence. "Your mother knew," Nina whispered. "She knew from the beginning. She tried to tell me." Justin's voice was hollow. "I didn't listen." "Why didn't she show you this?" "Because I wouldn't have believed her. I was in love, or what I thought was love. If Mom had presented this, I would have assumed she'd fabricated it. Priscilla knew that." "She sacrificed herself," Justin continued quietly. "Let Priscilla poison her, abuse her, because she knew the truth would only come out if things got bad enough that I couldn't ignore it. Or for someone else to expose it," Nina added softly. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. That evening, Nina returned to her motel room, but as she inserted her key, she noticed the door was already ajar. Inside, the room had been ransacked. On the bathroom mirror, written in red lipstick, "You should have stayed silent." Nina called Justin immediately. "Don't touch anything," he said. "I'm calling the police." "And Nina?" "Pack whatever you need. You're staying at the house. It's not safe for you alone." An hour later, Nina found herself back in the mansion, but this time as a guest in one of the family's private suites. Margaret appeared with fresh towels. "Welcome back, dear." "Have you heard anything?" Nina asked. "About Priscilla?" Margaret's expression darkened. "Only rumors. Some of the other staff she fired they've been calling. She's been threatening them too, trying to make sure no one testifies. There are others. At least 5 that I know of. All women of color. All dismissed for disciplinary reasons after they witnessed her treatment of Mrs. Hartwell." Nina felt sick. This wasn't just about one woman's cruelty. It was systematic, calculated, protected by privilege and power. That night, unable to sleep, Nina found herself in Eleanor's study. Justin appeared in the doorway. "I need to tell you something," he said. "The prosecutor called. They found Priscilla. Private airport, trying to board a chartered plane to Mexico. She's in custody. Nina's heart leaped. That's good news. Her lawyer is claiming self-defense, says you attacked her and she was afraid for her life. That everything she did to my mother was my mother's imagination, brought on by dementia. Nina's heart sank. But the videos, her lawyer says they're edited, taken out of context. That's insane. Maybe. But it's also strategic. Justin's expression was grim. Nina, this is going to get ugly. She has money, connections, lawyers whose job is to destroy your credibility. I know, Nina said quietly. But I also know the truth. The truth doesn't always win in court. Nina met his eyes. Then we make sure it does. We find those other women. We get their testimony. We show the pattern. And we don't back down. For the first time in days, Justin smiled. My mother chose well when she trusted you. The trial preparation began immediately. Justin hired the best criminal prosecutor in the state. They tracked down 4 of the 5 women Priscilla had fired, all of whom agreed to testify. Their stories were hauntingly similar. Abuse disguised as discipline, accusations of theft when they tried to report Priscilla's behavior, dismissals that destroyed their careers. But Priscilla's defense team was equally prepared. They painted Nina as an obsessed woman who'd fabricated evidence to frame an innocent woman out of jealousy and rage. It's actually brilliant, the prosecutor admitted. They're using racial and class dynamics to their advantage, suggesting you were resentful of Priscilla's relationship with Justin. That's disgusting, Nina said. That's reality in courtrooms. Nina, are you prepared for that? Nina thought of Eleanor, still recovering. Of the other women whose lives Priscilla had destroyed. Of her mother's voice. When you see wrong being done, baby girl, you speak up. I'm prepared, she said. The preliminary hearing was set for December. Nina spent the intervening weeks helping care for Eleanor, who slowly regained strength as the toxins left her system. I'll testify, Eleanor announced one morning. No matter what the doctors say. Mom, you're still recovering, Justin began. I'm recovered enough to speak the truth. That woman tried to kill me. I won't let her get away with it. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse was packed. News cameras lined the street. The story had captured national attention. Wealthy socialite versus black maid, privilege versus justice. Nina wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her face bare of makeup. She looked small next to Priscilla's high-powered legal team, but her spine was straight. Priscilla arrived in designer clothes and perfect makeup, playing the victim with practiced ease. She didn't look at Nina once. Eleanor's testimony was devastating. Despite her frailty, her voice was strong, her memory sharp. She described months of abuse, of being told she was crazy, of watching helplessly as Nina was fired for protecting her. That young woman saved my life, Eleanor said, pointing at Nina. And she lost everything for doing it. If that's not heroism, I don't know what is. Then came the videos. The courtroom fell silent as the footage played. Every kick, every cruel word, every deliberate act of poisoning captured in grainy black and white. There was no denying it. When Nina took the stand, Priscilla's lawyer attacked viciously. Isn't it true you were fired for poor performance? No. Isn't it true you harbored romantic feelings for Mr. Hartwell? No. Isn't it true you accessed that security footage illegally? Nina paused, her eyes finding Eleanor's in the gallery. The older woman nodded encouragement. I entered the home with permission from staff, Nina said clearly. And yes, I accessed footage that proved an elderly woman was being systematically poisoned and abused. If that makes me a criminal, then I'll accept that label. Because saving a life is more important than following rules designed to protect abusers. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. You expect this court to believe you had no ulterior motive? Nina leaned forward. I expect this court to watch the evidence and see the truth. I don't need you to believe my motives. The facts speak for themselves. The facts are that you're a disgruntled former employee. The facts, Nina interrupted, her voice rising, are that a 76-year-old woman was being slowly murdered in her own home. The facts are that I did the only thing any decent human being would do. I protected her. And the facts are that you're standing here, being paid a fortune to convince people that cruelty and violence are somehow acceptable when committed by someone wealthy and beautiful. The courtroom erupted. Nina saw it. The shift in the room. The jury leaning forward, paying attention not to the expensive suit and prepared questions, but to the truth in her words. Over the next 2 weeks, the other women testified. Their stories formed a pattern so clear, so undeniable, that even Priscilla's expensive lawyers couldn't obscure it. Rose, a Jamaican housekeeper fired after reporting bruises on Eleanor. Lisa, a Filipino cook dismissed for stealing after witnessing Priscilla screaming at Eleanor. Marie, a Haitian nurse let go for incompetence when she questioned Eleanor's sudden decline. Each woman had been silenced, discredited, erased. Until now. The prosecution's closing argument was simple. This case isn't complicated. We have video evidence of assault. We have medical evidence of poisoning. We have a pattern of abuse spanning months, witnessed by multiple people. Ask yourselves, what's more likely, that they're all lying, or that privilege and power tried to bury the truth and failed? The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Nina sat in the courthouse cafeteria, unable to eat, unable to think. Justin sat across from her, equally silent. Whatever happens, Justin said finally, I want you to know something. My mother's foundation, I want you to run it. Nina looked up, startled. What? The Clara Trust. It provides support for domestic workers, caregivers, people who do the hardest, most invisible work. You've shown more courage and integrity than anyone I've ever met. That's who should be leading it. Before Nina could respond, the bailiff appeared. Jury's back. They filed into the courtroom. Priscilla sat rigid at the defense table, her composure finally showing cracks. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. Nina's world narrowed to a single point. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded. Priscilla's face went white. On the charges of assault, battery, and criminal poisoning, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Nina couldn't breathe. She felt Justin's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Priscilla was led away in handcuffs. As she passed Nina's table, their eyes met one last time. Nina saw emptiness. Priscilla had built her entire life on manipulation and lies, and now there was nothing underneath. No remorse, no humanity, just void. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Nina stood on the steps, flanked by Justin and Eleanor. Miss Jackson, how do you feel? What message does this verdict send? Nina raised her hand, and the chaos quieted. Today isn't about me, she said. It's about every person who's been silenced, dismissed, or punished for speaking truth to power. It's about domestic workers, caregivers, and service employees who see things no one else sees and have no voice when they try to report them. This verdict says that your truth matters, that you matter, regardless of your income, your accent, or the color of your skin. She paused. But this isn't over. Abusers count on victims being too afraid or too tired to fight back. We have to change that, not just in courtrooms, but in homes, workplaces, and communities everywhere. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Well said, my dear. That evening, back at the mansion, they sat together in Eleanor's study. You know, Eleanor said thoughtfully, when I was a young nurse, I learned that healing isn't about erasing wounds. It's about acknowledging them, treating them properly, and giving them time to close. We've acknowledged what happened. Now comes the healing. Justin poured 3 glasses of wine. To truth. To courage, Eleanor added. Nina raised hers last. To second chances. 3 months later. The Clara Trust Foundation opened its doors on a crisp February morning. The building was modest but warm, welcoming, staffed entirely by people who understood struggle. Nina stood at the front desk when the bell above the door chimed. A young woman entered, Hispanic, early 20s, her eyes darting nervously. "Can I help you?" Nina asked gently. I don't know." The woman's voice trembled. "I work for a family. Good people, I thought. But the wife, she's been hurting the grandmother. And when I tried to say something, they fired me. Said I was lying. Now I can't find work anywhere." Nina's heart ached with recognition. She came around the desk and took the woman's hand. "You came to the right place," she said softly. "We believe you, and we're going to help you fight back." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Really? That's what we're here for." Nina smiled. "You're not alone anymore." As she led the woman to a consultation room, Nina caught her reflection in the glass door. She looked different than a year ago. Older, wearier, but also stronger, more certain. Her phone buzzed, a text from Justin. "Board meeting at 3. Mom insists on attending even though doctor said to rest. Your influence on her is terrible." Nina smiled and typed back, "She's impossible, but that's why we love her. See you at 3. And Justin, thank you for everything." She slipped the phone back and returned to her work. Outside, the city moved on with its business. But inside, something revolutionary was taking root. A place where truth was valued over power, where the most vulnerable voices were heard first, where justice wasn't just an idea, but a practice. Nina thought of her mother, of that worn photograph still in her wallet. She thought of Eleanor's courage and Justin's transformation. She thought of Priscilla, locked away where she could hurt no one else. But mostly she thought about the woman in the consultation room, the one who'd found the courage to walk through that door and ask for help. "We're going to change things," Nina whispered to herself, "one truth at a time." And in that moment, change didn't seem impossible at all. Retry DS continue, but make sure it doesn't pass 4,000 word 1 year later. The award ceremony was held in a hotel ballroom, crystal chandeliers glittering overhead, tables draped in white linen. Nina felt out of place in her borrowed evening gown, but Eleanor's hand on her arm steadied her. "Breathe, dear," Eleanor whispered. "You've faced worse than a room full of philanthropists." Nina laughed softly. "Barely." The MC took the stage. "Tonight, we honor individuals who've made extraordinary contributions to social justice. Our next award goes to someone who risked everything to protect the vulnerable, and in doing so, inspired a movement. Please welcome Nina Jackson, founder and director of the Clara Trust Foundation." Applause erupted. Nina walked to the stage on trembling legs, accepting the glass trophy that felt both too heavy and too light for what it represented. "When I was fired for protecting an elderly woman from abuse," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. But what I actually lost was the illusion that staying silent keeps you safe. Silence doesn't protect us. It protects abusers." She looked out at the audience, finding Eleanor's proud face, Justin's supportive smile. "This award isn't mine alone. It belongs to every domestic worker who's ever been afraid to speak up, to every caregiver who's witnessed abuse and reported it, knowing they'd face retaliation, to everyone who chose truth over safety." Her voice strengthened. "We are building a world where protecting someone doesn't cost you everything, where your word matters just as much as anyone else's, where justice isn't determined by the size of your bank account." She raised the trophy. "This is for all of us. And we're just getting started." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later, as the evening wound down, Nina found herself on the hotel balcony, looking out over the city lights. Justin joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Quite a speech," he said, offering her a glass. "I meant every word." "I know. That's what made it powerful." He paused. "My mother wanted me to tell you something. She's too proud to say it herself." "What's that?" "That you saved her life twice. Once when you protected her from Priscilla, and again when you showed her that goodness still exists in the world." Nina's eyes stung with sudden tears. She saved mine too, gave me purpose when I thought I had none left. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Do you ever think about that night? Justin asked, when you found the footage. Every day, but not with regret, with gratitude. Gratitude? Nina smiled. Because it taught me something important. The truth will cost you. It will take things from you. But what it gives back, integrity, peace, the ability to look yourself in the mirror, that's priceless. Justin nodded slowly. My mother says you're the daughter she never had. And she's the mother I needed when I lost mine. From inside, Eleanor's laughter rang out, strong, vibrant, alive. They turned to see her holding court with a group of young activists, her pale blue eyes sparkling with the same fire that had helped her survive her darkest days. She's remarkable, Justin said. She always was, Nina replied. The world just wasn't paying attention. As the night deepened and the celebration continued, Nina felt something settle in her chest. Not closure exactly, but completion. The story that began with violence and betrayal had transformed into something beautiful, a foundation that had already helped over 200 workers, a movement that was changing laws, and most importantly, a community of people who refused to let injustice thrive in silence. Priscilla was serving her sentence, her appeals denied. The truth was out, the pattern exposed. And countless women were finding their voices because one woman had refused to be silenced. Nina thought about the young woman who'd walked through the foundation's doors that first day, terrified and alone. She was working now, at a new job with employers who valued and respected her. She'd testified against her former employer, and with the foundation's legal support, she'd won. There would be more like her, more battles to fight, more truths to uncover. But Nina was ready, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that speaking up might cost you everything in the moment, but staying silent costs you something far more precious, your soul. And she would never, ever pay that price again. The end. If this story resonated with you, you're part of the change we need. Subscribe, share, and keep fighting for truth. Because stories like Nina's aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to look away from injustice. What will you do with your voice? Let us know in the comments. And remember, the most powerful thing you can do is stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. Be someone's Nina today.